from the rain and the stone, where the wind has no name and the traveler's alone. There's warmth in the fire and truth in the tale of the watcher who walks where the bold-hearted fail. He carries no sword, yet the darkness gives way to the lantern he lifts at the end of the day. He stands on the watchtower, still and unswayed, where the lost find a path through the fog and the fray.
That is right. So get this. I got an email from a couple that created an intro for us. How cool is this? So this is an ode to Pilgrim's Gray. You guys I have great listeners, and this is fantastic. And at the end of this particular podcast, I'll play the whole thing out, but I wanted to use it as an intro. And just thank you for being with us at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time. Every Monday is our long-form episode, and we also have our show Wednesday at 8 and Friday night at 9 p.m., all Central Standard Time. I might be changing some of those times up to fit with my schedule at work, but don't panic. Generally speaking, I have to pre-record these anyway. I just release them at certain times, and it's just becoming a challenge because of my work schedule lately, so I might make some changes, but never fear, you can listen anytime. So without further ado, I have a lot of notes on this one, so I'm going to get started right away and just dig into this and try to get through it. This is part 3 of the tactics of the they, which we now know from the first 2 episodes, are the Watchers who rebelled before the flood, and probably even before that, but and all the people who are associated with them, from their offspring to the human beings that have decided to take their side over God's. So let's just dig right in, because this is the more modern playbook for them. We've got the foundation now. We kind of know what they've been up to through history, and we've seen some of their tactics in the past, and it's very similar today. It's just using a different form of technology. So let's look at this. We've got 8 sections in this episode, episode 3. And we're going to try to burn right through them, so try to keep up, and we'll get through this. Section 1, digitally rewiring humanity. Now just imagine a world where the human soul is outdated technology, where your thoughts are stored on a server, your emotions can be deleted, and your memories, well, they're a product feature now. It sounds like science fiction, right? But it's not fiction anymore. It is an upcoming rollout plan. What we're watching is the oldest plan in history get a firmware update. The Watchers may have been bound in chains, some of them, but their influence is still running. And today it wears a hoodie, builds neural networks, and tweets about the future of humanity. So let's talk about transhumanism, sold to us as progress, right? But under the hood, it's ancient rebellion in a new skin. And I know at this point, it's pretty unavoidable. And that's how they make things work. Like in an election, the lesser of two evils or whatever. It's how they get their people in, selected or whatever. And you feel like you don't have any choice. Like, I didn't have any choice but to vote for this guy, even though he turns out to be, somebody under their control, right? Well, that's the way they planned it. You don't really have any choice. So, let's start with Neuralink. Founded in 2016 by none other than Elon Musk, of course, the guy who jokes about being an alien and names his kids like encryption keys. He describes Neuralink as a brain-computer interface, or BCI, that will allow humans to directly connect with artificial intelligence. Oh, but it's more than that. Because I believe it's going to use quantum computing too, and that's more than just artificial intelligence. Or it is an intelligence that operates out of a quantum field. Sorry about that. If you hear thunder in the background, it's because we're going through storms in Tennessee yet again, but it is that time of year. So with a high bandwidth brain-machine interface, we can actually go along for the ride, and we can have the option of merging with AI. That is an Elon Musk quote from a Neuralink launch event in 2019. Now, it sounds cozy, but notice the wording. Merge with AI. Not use it, not control it, merge. Grok, the symbol, all of that. He wants us to merge with it, and that word choice matters. So the FDA approved human trials for Neuralink in 2023, and they've already begun recruiting participants to implant chips into their skulls to help paraplegics move again. Sounds like a noble cause, sure, but once the tech is in place, what else can it do? BCI technology is being rapidly developed at DARPA, Facebook Reality Labs, and BlackRock Neurotech, all pitching the same dream: control machines with your mind, store memories in the cloud, and achieve mental upgrades. But the real goal is, to me, not improvement, but reprogramming. So, I say this is reformatting the divine code. If we believe Scripture, that man was made in the image of God, like Genesis 1:26 says, well, that's not just poetry. It means there is something sacred encoded into our design, physical, mental, and spiritual. So the transhumanists would say, well, it's not good enough. We'll fix it. And we're even if we believe what you said, we're in a fallen state and we're going to improve it, right? So this is exactly what the Watchers did before the flood. Corrupting the Image, like Douglas Hamp has said. He's a fantastic author. If you've not read Corrupting the Image 1 or 2, I suggest doing so. Now, not with AI, but with DNA. That is their plan. They taught forbidden knowledge, blended species, and brought chaos. The Book of Enoch describes them as teaching enchantments and the cutting of roots, ancient biotechnology. Now it's code and chips instead of blood and rituals. But I think it's both, really. But I mean, the focus is now on codes and chips, but I still think both are going on. As Elon Musk said, we are summoning the demon, right? At his MIT Aero Astro Centennial Symposium in 2014. Now, he was referring to artificial and general intelligence, and yes, he did actually say that. I know he likes to say things tongue-in-cheek, but these people at the top say things purposefully and intentionally because they know people hang on their every word. So the irony here is he's one of the people summoning it. What we're seeing now is the digitization of the soul, our consciousness becoming data, our biology becoming hardware. It is the ultimate counterfeit of resurrection. But instead of being transformed into glory, we're being offered a cheap download of self full of bugs and surveillance permissions. So ask yourself, where does all of this interface? Well, I'm sure you've already heard of and seen the foundations being laid for in various ways, if you believe the conspiracy theories, which I do, because I can give you evidence after evidence after evidence that your government lies to you, is not above taking you out, and if you're in the way, and will do whatever they want, whenever they want, and you'll like it, and they'll build a narrative of lies around it to say that it's something that it isn't if they think you're going to get too upset over it. So enter smart cities, entire urban centers wired with sensors, cameras, and biometric scanners. Cities like Neom, Saudi Arabia, Osongdo, South Korea, and Barcelona are test beds for the city of the future, except it's not designed for freedom. It's a panopticon wrapped in LED. Every move is tracked, every transaction recorded. And you combine this with a central bank digital currency and a social credit system, and what you get isn't convenience. What you get is digital slavery, and with Neuralink, a hive mind enslaving you to it. Now, of course, it's not going to be couched that way. I'm warning you that that's what it is, but They're going to paint a completely different picture of this to make you want it, and to make you think you can't live without it, and to make you think, oh, my neighbor's got it, my neighbor's kid's got it, and he's like a walking Google machine. He doesn't even have to search Google. It just downloads right into his head. How can my son compete for college for that? And then you'll want it. And you'll beg them to get it. You wait. There's going to be plenty of you out there that are going to beg for this. So, the fourth industrial revolution will lead us to a fusion of our physical, digital, and biological identity. That was, or maybe I should have read that with a thick German accent, because it was Klaus Schwab, founder of the World Economic Forum, The Great Reset 2020, who said it. So, yeah, fusion again, always merging, always blending what should remain distinct. It should remain distinct. Because you can't trust the people who are wanting to merge you with things. No matter how much they try to earn your trust, build your trust, and tell you everything is going to be fantastic, and maybe even give you lying signs and wonders to make you think it's the best thing ever, and people like me are fools for challenging it. But one day, you're going to wish you'd listened to this warning. And I know this because of what Scripture has to say about it. Some of you will initially buy into all of this, and one day you're going to seek death and be unable to find it because it's so horrible. So, their tactic is to normalize, normalize, normalize. Don't force it, make it fashionable. It's how we always fall for everything, right? If everybody's doing it. That's why bots exist. If you've ever wondered online, why do people use bots? That's just stupid. Because you fall for it. That's why. Because when you think everybody likes something, then you like it. You may not want to believe that about yourself, but it's true. Even I fall for that too. You know, it's when we think we want to go look at it, right? Oh, why are all these people checking that out? Is that something great? You know, or when they play a song 8 million times on the radio, it's like at first you really know the song sucks, but when they play it that many times, you think, well, maybe I'm wrong about this. They know how the human mind works. We are all bandwagoners to some degree. So, show AI as your quirky sidekick. Market wearable tech as self-care. Push filters of avatars and digital selves until the real self feels insufficient. Condition people to believe they are nothing but data, then offer the upgrade. It's already happening. Can you scroll through your feed without seeing AI avatars or just what I just described to you? You can't, can you? So it's not a conspiracy. It's becoming public policy. If you read UNESCO's 2021 Ethics of Artificial Intelligence report, it includes terms like neural rights, digital embodiment, and algorithmic fairness. The assumption isn't if we'll merge with machines, but how to manage the fallout when we do. They're already assuming you're all going to do it and creating laws and algorithmic fairness for when it happens. It's just an assumption you're all going to get suckered into it. So, the final form, ownership of thought. Once your mind is connected to a network, you no longer own your thoughts. If you think that's dramatic, consider this. In 2020, a Chilean neuroscientist named Dr. Rafael Yuste introduced legislation called Neuro Rights, warning that without it, corporations can exploit your brain data for advertising and behavior modification. Think Cambridge Analytica, but inside your head. So let's be clear, transhumanism isn't about enhancing human life, it's about replacing it with something else, something programmable, like that little French atheist twerp from the WEF mentioned. Something controllable, and the watchers, whether spiritual or embodied through willing elites, have always had the same goal: break the divine pattern and rebuild a counterfeit kingdom. Out of chaos comes their reordering and reimaging. They don't want God's world. They want it replaced with their vision of what they think it should be. And they don't care how much it angers God. Well, they will, but for now they don't. But I think it's funny that they take their precious time and get permissions to act accordingly, just in case he gets too angry, right? So, when the serpent said, "You will be like gods," this is what he meant. Not divinity, not glory, just data. That is a quote from somebody from X that I found. I don't know who to attribute it to, but I found it interesting, so I thought it would be good to wrap up section 1 with that and move on to redefining human nature and destroying identity. So if you can't erase the image of God with a chip in the skull, try eroding it from the inside out. Forget AI for a second. What if you could make humanity forget what it even is? So welcome to phase 2. So you've seen it. You've probably felt it. We now live in a world where identity is not discovered. It's invented. Where the ancient boundaries, male and female, good and evil, even human and not human, are all called oppressive constructs. The sacred is rebranded. The truth is optional. Everything solid has been melted down into whatever the algorithm wants it to be today. So if you've wondered what all of that crazy BS is about, this is it. If you've wondered why are people just losing their ever-loving minds, this is it. It is a tactic being used by those ancient antediluvian little g gods for this purpose that I'm telling you about right now. So Genesis 1:27 tells us, "So God created man in his own image, male and female, he created them." That was a line watchers could not cross. They could tamper, twist, infect, but they could never replicate that blueprint. So today, instead of brute force corruption like in the days of Noah, because I believe there's a restrainer of their lawlessness, the new tactic is slow deletion, one identity file at a time. Gender fluidity? It's not compassion, it's confusion. Deconstructing the family is not freedom, it is fragmentation. Post-truth logic is not enlightenment, it's entropy. And entropy is exactly what the watchers need. Chaos gives cover for redefinition, and redefinition opens the door to replacement, which is what they want. Create chaos, create confusion, create a world where white is black and black is white, and then come in and clean up the mess. So you create the problem, you come up with a solution, and the resolution is that everybody views you as saints and gods and practically worship you because you're helping them, even though you're the one that created the problem to begin with. So they did this on the education front first, right? Rewiring minds early, right? So education, in 2015, the UN launched Agenda 2030, which includes a sweeping plan to redefine education across the globe. One of its goals, global citizenship education, which, that sounds nice, doesn't it? Until you realize it's seeking to supersede family culture and faith traditions. How nice. So a quote from UNESCO's Transforming Education Summit 2022, quote, "Education must not simply inform." Of course, why would we think anything other, It must reshape the values, behavior, and worldview of the next generation. That sounds like really great reading, writing, and arithmetic, doesn't it? Just what our kids need. So in other words, don't teach children what is true. No, we can't do that. Teach them how to feel truth. And who funds a lot of this global curriculum? Well, surprise. The Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the World Economic Forum. It's all your favorites, the usual suspects. And it's funny how they all show up at the crime scene, all of them. One of their representatives, right? So in media and pop culture, you have identity as performance, right? If you turn on Netflix right now, or if you browse TikTok or just sit through an award show, the message is pretty consistent. There is no absolute truth. Reality is a construct. Your identity is your emotion of the moment. Yep. That reconditions your mind and prepares it for problems that will require a solution that they'll present, and in the resolution, they're viewed as heroes. In 2021, Facebook rebranded as Meta, announcing the coming of the metaverse, where you can choose any identity, any body, any voice. You're not who you were born to be. You're whoever or whatever the system lets you be today. So, in the future, we will all have digital twins, replicas of ourselves that exist in the cloud and interact in our place. That is Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, World Economic Forum 2022. It almost sounds like that recent Netflix show with Millie Bobby Brown in it and Chris Pratt with all the robots, where you could be in one world and in another at the same time. So just let that sink in. A version of you disembodied, filtered, edited, and controlled, and a clone with no soul, no divine spark, no image of God. That's not innovation. That's identity theft on a spiritual scale, folks. And it's not good. They're going to tell you it is, and they're going to make you feel like it is, and you're being conditioned even right now to think it's awesome. But it will not be. So behind the scenes, corporations and NGOs are already weaponizing this fluidity for power consolidation. Well, why are they doing this? Because a person who doesn't know who they are is easy to market, to manipulate, and to govern. That's why you never rise up. You never do anything. You don't even know what to do or how to do it. You just take it all in and feel the chaos and want somebody else to fix the problem. And that's where they'll come in and fix it. And you'll accept it and think it's awesome. So in 2022, over 600 U.S. companies signed a corporate pledge to support gender ideology through internal policy and customer-facing initiatives. Meanwhile, laws that protect conscience, parental rights, or faith-based identity are being eroded or reframed as hate, calling evil good and good evil. We are rapidly moving toward a future where biological sex is irrelevant. That is Planned Parenthood Federation 2021 in their educational briefing. Doesn't that sound lovely? And it's not just political activism, it's a deep spiritual effort to sever humanity from its creator-given identity. And once that connection's gone, what's left is malleable and marketable. And they know this. So now if you're blur gender, faith, family, and even logic, what do you end up with? A world that's ready to accept virtually anything, even the post-human. No longer human. You think about it. We have drag performers teaching toddlers. I just recently showed my wife a thing from, I think, 2022, the rainbow dildo butt monkey guy. It's really a thing. And that thing was doing a performance to kids in a grade school library. Or it might have been a local library. It doesn't matter. It was for kids. That's insane. We have lost our minds. We have adults identifying as animals, furniture. I'm not kidding. Furniture and imaginary beings. AI influencers now exist, and people are developing emotional relationships with AI. Hell, we have people in Japan marrying their pillows. And then synthetic embryos. No sperm, no egg. They're being grown in artificial wombs in the UK, China, and Israel as of 2023. No joke. It isn't random. It is strategic. The watchers don't care if you identify as a toaster or a turtle, as long as you stop identifying as the image bearer of God. Let me say that again. They don't care if you identify as a toaster or a turtle, as long as you do what? Stop identifying as the image bearer of God. That is what they want. Because they hate it. So, another quote I saw to include in my notes, don't know where it came from, but it's awesome. If you don't know what you are, someone else will define it for you. And if they define it, they can redesign it. That's a biggie. So let's move on to section 3. Manufactured chaos and the blueprint for global governance. Remember this quote? I'm sure you do. Never let a good crisis go to waste. It's not a meme. It is a quote from Rahm Emanuel, former chief of staff to President Obama. But it's not just a political strategy. It's a global blueprint, and it's older than we think. This section isn't about disasters themselves, but about what gets built afterwards, because that's what they're interested in, the they. What emerges from the rubble of every war, financial crash, healthcare, or ecological panic? The same thing, over and over. More centralization, more surveillance, less freedom, and a little less humanity. Remember the Patriot Act? I remember falling for that. I was all about it. I wanted to take it to the people that hurt us. I wanted them to be able to survey them and all this other stuff. Turns out, this allows our government to identify anybody they want as a terrorist, and you have no Bill of Rights. They could take you away in the middle of the night without a warrant, and you disappear, and you're never seen again, and it's perfectly legal thanks to the Patriot Act. All they got to do is designate you as a terrorist. You wonder why they designate parents showing up to school meetings as terrorists? This is why. They can arrest you for no reason whatsoever without a warrant because you've been designated a terrorist, and you'll never be seen again if that's what they want. How's that for freedom? Patriot Act. Yeah. How ironic and ridiculous. So we're going to show how manufactured chaos is being used today strategically and globally to resurrect basically Babel 2.0, a one-world system rooted in control, not compassion, and unlike past empires, this one isn't made of stone or steel. It's digital, biometric, and invisible. So let's be direct. Global governance is no longer a conspiracy, it is policy. National sovereignty is an outdated concept. We need global governance to deal with global challenges. That is Jacques Attali, former advisor to French President François Mitterrand and architect of EU economic policy. What a douchey quote. Sorry. These people have no respect for personal autonomy, property rights, or freedom. The Watchers' original goal at Babel was to centralize humanity under a counterfeit spiritual and governmental system. Genesis 11:4 makes it clear. Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves. Does that sound anything like what God had told Noah and his descendants to do? Or does it sound like the exact opposite? Yeah. Thanks. Modern elites, knowingly or unknowingly, are following the same exact blueprint. I think it's knowingly, don't you? So in June 2020, during the peak of COVID lockdowns, our favorite German mad scientist sounding guy, Klaus Schwab, founder of the WEF, launched a global campaign titled The Great Reset. I'm so tempted to read this quote in his accent. The pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. Klaus Schwab, COVID-19, The Great Reset. So the plan, use the chaos of the pandemic to reshape every aspect of life: economy, education, food, governance, and even human identity. So the official WEF agenda includes 1. Digital ID systems for global citizens. 2. Central bank digital currencies. 3. A universal basic income tied to carbon and social behavior. But honestly, they don't really care about that. It's the only reason it's there is as a method of control. They don't give a damn about how much carbon is out there. And in a sense, they don't really care about your social behavior, other than those are two very broad-based things that they can use to control your every move and convince your neighbors to be shamed into controlling you also. And we know this works because how many of you shamefully made your neighbors shamed into wearing a mask and getting a certain stick in the arm and said things to them like, you're going to kill my grandma if you don't, because you care more about your freedom and all this BS. When we all knew it was lies. Those of us who didn't take it, we knew it was BS. And now the truth is coming out about it. But there are many, many, many of you out there that were willing to put your neighbors to shame and gaslighted them and made them feel like crap because you went along with the crowd. And so now I would just say, I don't want to shame you into behaving right, but just know better next time. Don't trust your government. They do not have your best interest at heart. And I'm not talking about the people working out there hard, the nurses and the doctors. They have to do what they're told or lose their jobs, many of them. And many of them were willing to lose their jobs and went to different places and took a position somewhere else because they did not want to comply with the BS. And so those are the real heroes out there. And so then the fourth thing is the fourth industrial revolution, described as a merging of humans with AI and machines. And let's not forget the slogan Schwab dropped at Davos in 2016. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. And he wasn't kidding. That is his vision. It's a world where property, privacy, and independence are phased out in the name of sustainability and safety. Because they're the elites, they're the bloodlines. They are either the watchers themselves or people who are aligned with them, and you may as well be a cow in a field to them. And they don't understand why you don't listen to them and everything that they say. They see you as idiots, useful idiots. So, crisis one, the pandemic as global conditioning. We had the pandemic being the greatest psychological operation of the 21st century, not because the virus wasn't real, but because of what was done with it. Governments worldwide used it to implement emergency powers, enforce global lockdowns, roll out, the vax passports, and expand digital surveillance infrastructure. In 2021, the EU launched its digital COVID certificate, which quickly became a prototype for a pan-European digital ID system. Quote, this is a step toward building a health certificate infrastructure that could be expanded to other areas. Of course it could be. It'll be expanded to every area, and that's from the European Commission briefing in April 2021. In other words, proof of health was the foot in the door, because it's the easiest way to sucker you. You care about your health and they know it, and it scares you, and they love fear because you're controlled by it. So now those systems are being expanded for banking, travel, and social compliance. And if you don't think that you're not controlled by fear, just remember how many people fearfully fell for all this because they were afraid of losing their job and their income. Even the truckers gave up for fear of income when the Canadian government basically shut them down and shut down everybody trying to help them with their income. Fear is a huge motivator. So in the U.S., the NSCAI report, a National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence, 2021, openly recommends using crisis to expand biometric and AI-based surveillance systems. Every crisis you see, watch what happens afterwards. And listen to the ridiculous bills and the names of those bills they come up with, because they're never what they seem to be. So, Crisis 2, economic collapse and the push for CBDCs. The 2023 banking collapses, Silicon Valley Bank's signature and First Republic weren't just financial news, they were stage setting. Immediately after, the Federal Reserve launched its FedNow system in July of 2023. It's a real-time payment system that lays the groundwork for a U.S. central bank digital currency. Other countries followed very soon after. China is already piloting its digital yuan across several provinces. India launched the e-rupee in late 2022. And the EU, a central bank released design plan for the digital euro in 2023. Now, with here's a quote, with programmable money, governments can restrict purchases, freeze accounts, and incentivize behavior. That was Augustin Carstens, General Manager, Bank for International Settlements, 2020 speech at the IMF panel. What a jerk. They have no business restricting purchases, freezing accounts, and incentivizing behavior. Screw that guy. So, I'm sorry, this makes me angry. Because this is just tyranny, digital tyranny. It's evil. But these people always like to think they're doing good. You know, we're from the government and we're here to help you. Programmable, not cash, not yours. This is the economic Babel controlling you through code. So Crisis 3 will be climate emergency and behavioral scoring. It's already going on. Every year, the WEF, the UN, and the IMF crank up the rhetoric on climate crisis, tying environmental protection to personal behavior. The 15-minute city concept being piloted in places like Oxford, UK, Paris, Barcelona is pitched as convenience, but enforces movement tracking and limits based on carbon usage. Carbon footprint trackers are already being implemented into major banking apps, like MasterCard's DO card, which automatically blocks spending after a carbon limit is reached. That is horrible. Absolutely horrible and shameful. Quote, "We are developing individualized carbon footprint trackers," unquote. That is J. Michael Evans, president of Alibaba WEF 2022 panel. It hasn't happened yet, but it's coming, and we need to be speaking out about it and learning about it. That's why I'm doing this podcast. People, you might be aware of it, but many people aren't, and you need to share this far and wide so that people learn about it. You know, I'm not just saying that to promote my podcast. I've got 40,000 something subscribers just on YouTube alone. I just want people to be warned of what's coming. And if you've ever wondered, well, what am I supposed to do about it? Share the info. If you don't have a podcast, share the info. Take what I've taken all this time and effort to do and like it, share it, comment on it. That is something you can do in under 10 seconds, and it makes a difference. In the meantime, they're trying to control what you drive, eat, and buy in the name of Earth, allegedly. Do you really think they care about the Earth? Because I don't. So like Babel, it's always about unity, but not under God. So the psychological operation here is to confuse, divide, and rebuild. To pull this off, the public has to be psychologically softened through division, distraction, and trauma. And what they call this is fifth-generation warfare. To quote Lieutenant Colonel David Kilcullen, "Non-kinetic warfare that uses information, social engineering, and manufactured crisis to produce mass compliance without a single bullet." Did you hear that? They're not bothering to shoot bullets at you. They're doing something even more damaging. They are changing your entire life without firing a shot, through using fear and false flags and psychological operations to screw you over and make you think in a constant state of fear and crisis and just stress, so that they can force their will upon you. That is a quote, again, from Lieutenant Colonel David Kilcullen, counterinsurgency expert in the Accidental Guerrilla from 2009. So then we have AI manipulated social media, deep fake confusion. You don't even know what's real anymore out there, image-wise or video, do you? Admit it. We don't know. And then we have algorithmic echo chambers, right? You are constantly fed things you want to hear and you like to hear in echo chambers. And they do that to keep you constantly fed a state of chemicals in your mind to basically addict you to your scrolling. So you get to see all the things that they know you want to see, so you'll stay locked in like a fish on a hook until they can feed you something they want you to see. And then, of course, the constant panic cycles, so that you're psychologically conditioned to receive a savior from all this. The goal is to exhaust your collective will and make the population beg for order, and then offer it in exchange for freedom. That's the tactic, and it's working. Look all around you. It is working. And it's because we don't share this information. We absorb it ourselves. If we even make it this far into a podcast like this, we're just done. And we don't share it. We don't move that information on. Hell, if you can't even take the energy to click and share this, at least, the next time you're talking to somebody, share the information with your mouth. Tell somebody, So when we move on to the biblical patterns of Babel being reborn, let's remember that Genesis 11 tells us that Babel was about one language, and now it's digital code, right? That digital code allows this kind of communication to go out in every language. So it's a universal language, ones and zeros. One name, now it's global ID, right? And one system, now it's AI-controlled finance and movement. But just like before, God will scatter it. Isaiah 8:10. Devise your strategy, but it will be thwarted. Propose your plan, but it will not stand, for God is with us. Remember that verse and keep it close in your heart for the upcoming years. And here's another quote I came across on X, where I hang out a lot on my You Will Know channel. Chaos is the smokescreen, Babel is being rebuilt, and every tower comes with a fall. I thought that was a cool quote. So section 4, psychological warfare through media and pop culture. Quote, if you want to control the future, don't invade a country, just produce its entertainment, unquote. So the watchers don't need armies when they have algorithms. They don't need temples like the Lieutenant Colonel mentioned when they have screens. The battlefield has shifted from Babel's bricks to Netflix, TikTok, Spotify, and Google. Or any other social media, you name it. This is psychological warfare, and it's not theory. It's admitted, practiced, and documented. In military doctrine, again, this is known as fifth-generation warfare, where the goal is not to destroy infrastructure, but to reshape minds and beliefs through manipulation of information, emotion, and perception. So, quote, the new battlefield is the population's cognitive space, unquote. From NATO Review Magazine article, Cognitive Warfare, NATO's New Battlefield, October 2021. Let that sink in. Your mind is the battlefield, and they're not even hiding it. But you're not paying attention, and they know it. So, I know many of you are, and I thank you for that. Many of you are paying attention, but you need to wake up more people. So, pop culture is propaganda, rewiring morality. Let's start with the obvious. Entertainment isn't just entertainment anymore, if it ever was. It's doctrine delivery with a production budget. According to a 2017 study by the University of Southern California's Norman Lear Center, more than 60% of primetime television episodes included messaging tied to political, social, or medical behavior. I think it's probably higher than that. I can't watch a show without seeing it anymore. So I don't watch a whole lot of TV. So, quote, writers' rooms are increasingly working with behavioral scientists to shape narratives that nudge viewers towards desired altitude or attitudes, unquote. That is from Hollywood Health and Society, part of USC Annenberg. In other words, they're not writing to entertain you, they're engineering your worldview. That's what they're doing. For example, Disney partners with organizations like GLAAD to enforce specific messaging quotas around gender and identity in children's programming. Marvel and DC promote deified superheroes that mirror ancient gods, encouraging hero worship and moral relativism. Shows like Lucifer humanize Satan, while faith-based characters are ridiculed or demonized or made out to be insane or stupid or ridiculous. Music videos from artists like Lil Nas X openly invoke occult imagery. You can just see the Montero video where he gives a lap dance to Satan to see that this is the case. And we could all probably provide examples. In fact, I see it. I see examples from my friends in Instagram after example all the time, right? We all know it. We are in an era where music and visual culture has merged with esoteric and occult symbolism more overtly than ever before. And that is from Professor Eric Davis, author of Technosis. So now add artificial intelligence into this mix. Every scroll, swipe, and click feeds behavioral data into AI models designed to optimize addiction and drive subconscious influence. It learns with every click you make. TikTok's algorithm is a finely tuned psychological weapon. That is from Tristan Harris from Google ethicist in the Social Dilemma documentary from 2020. In 2021, a leaked document revealed that TikTok's algorithm was deliberately engineered to increase screen time by identifying emotional vulnerabilities such as loneliness or depression and feeding content that intensified those emotions. That is from a Wall Street Journal article, August 2021. The goal is to keep you in a feedback loop, not just to sell ads, but to shape beliefs. And it's not hypothetical. The Psychological Operation Division, or PSYOP, of the U.S. Army has been using media and narrative control since World War II. Today it's digital. Quote, if you control the narrative, you control perception. If you control perception, you control reality. That is Colonel Charles Ridley, U.S. PSYOP Training Manual, Declassified, 2005. They're playing with your heads, folks. And they're using your favorite social media to do it. Just be aware of it. The more aware of it you are, the less likely they can pick your brain apart. So it doesn't stop at screens. It begins in the classroom. In 2020, the World Economic Forum, UNESCO, and the OECD collaborated on the Future of Education framework. We must train children not merely to remember facts, but to unlearn outdated worldviews and prepare to be citizens of a global society. That is from WEF Education 4.0 Roadmap in 2020. That sounds lovely, doesn't it? Until you realize that outdated worldviews include belief in objective truth, national sovereignty, traditional morality, and religious identity. They get to control what's outdated, not you. No, not you. And who funds the curriculum developed in over 100 countries? Yeah, you guessed it. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Open Society Foundation of George Soros, and the Rockefeller Foundation, screwing all of our children's education up since the 1800s. These are the same name-pushing transhumanism, digital ID, and population control, also writing your children's textbooks. And then we have the return of ritual in entertainment. Many believe ancient rituals disappeared, but they didn't. They just got better at lighting and a Grammy slot. The 2023 Grammy Awards featured Sam Smith and Kim Petras performing Unholy in a literal red-lit devil theme stage complete with horns, cages, and flames. Celebrities openly wear occult symbolism, one-eyed symbolism, inverted crosses, Baphomet horns under the guise of fashion. How many have we seen either knowingly or accidentally giving the as above, so below symbol of Baphomet? And then you had the 2012 London Olympics opening ceremony featuring a giant figure of death looming over hospital beds surrounded by masked nurses and child actors, oddly foreshadowing the lovely 2020 events. Quote, modern mass rituals are disguised as entertainment, but retain the structure of initiation and symbolic transformation, unquote, from Mark Paseo, former occultist turned researcher. These performances aren't just shock value, they are normalizing and desensitizing, and every ritual is about gateway access, opening spiritual doors. If you don't believe that, just know that every ritual that gets performed, whether it's at the Super Bowl or other places, keeps making the world weirder and weirder and weirder, and there's more what people like to call NPCs walking around. Are there not? So let's connect the dots here. They flood culture with contradictory identities, creating confusion. They glamorize the supernatural and self-divinization for pride's sake. They mock traditional values while celebrating rebellion to invert. And they use trauma cycles of fear and overstimulation and stress for disassociation. This is straight from the playbook, folks. This is the tactics of the they. Before the flood, the Watchers corrupted the world by teaching forbidden knowledge, glamorizing violence, and unleashing lust and pride. Today it's the same, only now it's sponsored by Coca-Cola and live streamed in 4K. And these are just simply facades and really things just to hide their involvement. If they can get you to participate, then they can retain their freedom in this world and in theirs. They push it too far and don't have the permissions, I think by heavenly rules they get locked up. That's why they're very careful. So, another interesting quote I found: you don't have to believe every lie they tell, but if you consume them long enough, you'll start to live like they're true. And boy, isn't that the truth. If we haven't seen that going on since 2020, then our eyes aren't even open. So let's go to section 5 here. More ritual, human trafficking, SRA, and the energy harvest. Quote, if you think ritual sacrifice was left behind in the Bronze Age, you're not paying attention. You're just watching the wrong Netflix category. Yeah, I saw that on X and thought it was cool. So let's get something straight. When we talk about human trafficking, ritual abuse, and child exploitation, we are not dealing with a few isolated sickos anymore. We are talking about a global shadow economy. Makes way more money than drugs, folks. That touches politics, religion, entertainment, finance, and black budget science, and ties directly into the ancient Watcher agenda. They love when you surrender your children to them. And it's not about conspiracy, it's about a pattern recognition with real-world stats, names, arrests, and whistleblowers who've been silenced or smeared or done away with. But when you lay it all out, the rituals never stopped. They just learned to hide it better. So, we said it earlier, but it bears repeating. The Watcher Rebellion wasn't just about forbidden knowledge. It was about feeding on life itself, blending blood, spirit, and flesh for power. That's why you see albums called Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic. So they begin to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. That is from 1 Enoch chapter 7, verse 5. Today it's the same. Human life, especially children, it's being exploited on an industrial scale. Why? Because innocence, pain, and blood are currency in the unseen realm. It's not just psychological, it's energetic and spiritual. They need that energy. Our life force is in our blood. And they've left their first estate, and they need that energy. It's how they get their food and sustenance. That's probably why there's 300,000 children missing just in the last few years alone from across the border. So, according to the International Labor Organization 2022 report, over 49.6 million people are living in modern slavery, including 27.6 million in forced labor and 22 million in forced marriage. Human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world, generating more than $150 billion per year, according to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Blue Campaign. This isn't underground, it's a global system, and it's fueled by corruption and protected by money and influence. A case in point, the infamous Jeffrey Epstein, arrested in 2006, got a slap on the wrist, rearrested in 2019, and then, quote-unquote, died in a Manhattan prison cell under the most suspicious security lapse imaginable. We all know it's BS. His private island, Little St. James, was visited by celebrities, politicians, and royals. Court documents list dozens of minor victims, and by minor, I don't mean like they're not important. I mean like minors under the age of 18, trafficked for elite clients. Names like Bill Gates, Prince Andrew, and Bill Clinton appear frequently in relation to Epstein, though many deny involvement. Of course, who would not deny involvement in this? Nobody will admit it. They'll admit it even if we see camera footage of them, doing something to somebody underage. So even in mainstream outlets like The Guardian and The Wall Street Journal have confirmed these associations, according to a Wall Street Journal report in 2023, and yet no full client list, no mass arrests. And our current Attorney General still hasn't really released anything substantial, and we know it. But why? Because this system protects its own. And they don't give a damn what you think about it either. They will not. What are you going to do? Get really mad? Not watch a program for a while? I mean, why do you think they should care? They select themselves for office. They don't care about your vote. That should be clear to you by now after decades of thwarting and going completely against everything you believe in and stand for, and they still manage to get elected? Right. So if you Google SRA, most results will call it a hoax or moral panic. But that's because these same people also control the media and the search engines. But survivors and insiders would tell you a different story. Dr. Gordon Hammond, in 1992, at the 4th Annual Eastern Regional Conference on Abuse and Multiple Personality, Dr. Hammond gave a now famous lecture called the Greenbaum Speech. In it, he described patients recovering memories of structured ritual abuse, programming, and intergenerational cult systems involving Nazi scientists and military personnel. A quote from the Greenbaum Speech in 92 says, "These survivors describe abuse that's systematic, multi-generational, and often tied to black-robed rituals involving blood, symbols, and chanting." Now, this speech was so controversial that it nearly got him blacklisted from academia. Of course it did. There's so much money and power involved from these elites that don't want this known. They don't want their good times interrupted. And I know we've already covered MKUltra, but what many don't know is that several survivors of Project Monarch, which is a sub-program of MKUltra, describe ritual abuse used as trauma-based mind control. Kathy O'Brien, in The Transformation of America, 1995, said, "The spiritual element of Monarch is essential. Demons were invoked. Rituals were performed. The trauma opens gateways." And then they program those DID individuals to accomplish certain tasks under certain communications. It awakens the installed program, if you will, and the other main program isn't aware of it. That's why you can have people commit atrocious acts and the main personality doesn't even remember doing it. So you may not agree with every detail, but ask this: if none of it's true, why was MKUltra classified for decades? Why did the CIA destroy thousands of their documents in 1973 just before a wave of FOIA requests or Freedom of Information Act requests? Seems like there should have been some arrests made for obstruction of justice. So, from Bohemian Grove to the Super Bowl halftime shows, elite gatherings are riddled with symbolism that looks more like the Book of Enoch than a PR campaign. Bohemian Grove, annual gathering of the world's most powerful men in California. It includes a ceremony called the Cremation of Care, involving robes, a giant owl statue, and mock child effigy burning. Or at least that's what they say. It was filmed by Alex Jones in the year 2000, I think, and verified by multiple journalists. John Ronson, a journalist for them in Adventures with Extremists, said, "I've never seen such a mixture of paganism, politics, and power in one place." And let's not forget our favorite witch, Marina Abramovic. In 2016, leaked emails showed Podesta brothers invited to an art event involving spirit cooking by performance artist, that's great, Marina Abramovic. Her art, wow, regularly features blood, urine, semen, and occult invocations, yet she's hosted by celebrities and politicians alike. Of course, who wouldn't want blood, urine, and semen smeared all over the place while making occult invocations? It's perfectly normal. That's perfectly great. And who wouldn't want that as their representative in the halls of Congress or their president? It's perfectly normal. Ruz Dizdar in The Black Awakening writes, in spiritual circles, blood is the most potent offering because it opens doorways. It sure does. So let's go a bit deeper. The obsession with blood, especially young blood, isn't just a vampire trope. In 2016, biotech startup Ambrosia began offering plasma infusions from young donors to the elderly, suggesting it could reverse aging. Dr. Tony Wiscori, Stanford University in Nature Medicine, in 2014, said, young blood plasma has beneficial effects on cognition and lifespan, at least in mice. Yeah. Well, it quickly drew criticism as modern vampirism and was shut down by the FDA, but similar research is quietly ongoing. Of course it is. Why the interest in young blood? Well, because ancient occult systems and fallen entities have always viewed life essence as power. They need it for energy. That's why you have every culture in the entire world for centuries writing about creatures that ingest blood of some sort and live long, unnatural lives and have strange powers, whatever you want to call it. Every culture. It's not just fiction. Blood was used in Watcher-era rituals, and it remains the spiritual currency of rebellion. So where does all this lead? Well, when innocence is defiled, a spiritual transaction takes place. Fear, trauma, and suffering release energy and opens gateways. Psalm 106:38 says, they have shed innocent blood, and the land was polluted with blood. It's not just moral decay, it's ritualized spiritual warfare. And the Watchers, they don't need altars anymore. They've got operating rooms, boardrooms, and music videos. They don't need temples, they have movie theaters. You worship them, and you don't even know it. Why do you think they're called stars in Hollywood? Do you ever think about the words that you use? Anyway, I found a quote. The gods of old demanded blood. The gods of now just changed the packaging. That is correct. And a great quote. Some really smart people on X. So, section 6, we'll be wrapping it up here soon. I know this is a long one, but hang with me. It's important. Matthew 24:37 says, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man. Now, you've heard the verse, and you might have quoted it, but have you really stopped to ask what was happening in the days of Noah that made God hit reset on the entire planet? It wasn't just bad behavior. It was biological corruption. The Book of Enoch says the Watchers taught mankind forbidden sciences, including how to splice genetics, mix species, and create hybrid abominations. Now, I know some of you will say, well, that's not the Bible. Well, Moses recorded headline news because most of the people he was writing to were already familiar with the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jasher, the Book of Jubilees. They already knew the stories. There was no need for him to rehash the obvious. But you need to familiarize yourself with it. So, in today, the same story is being rewritten in peer-reviewed journals, backed by multi-billion-dollar biotech companies and funded by governments in the name of progress. Yep. Welcome to Genetic Manipulation 2.0, where ancient rebellion meets modern lab coats. Genesis 6:12 says, and God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. It's not a metaphor. The phrase all flesh doesn't just mean behavior, it means biology. The ancient record in 1 Enoch 7-10 describes fallen angels teaching how to mix species, create hybrid beings, and alter the natural order, which they were also doing themselves. In 1 Enoch 7:5, it says they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish. Sound familiar? Well, let's look at what we're doing today and who's funding it. In 2012, scientists Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier pioneered CRISPR-Cas9, a gene editing technology that allows researchers to cut and paste DNA with precision. How cool, right? Jennifer said, "We now have the ability to rewrite the code of life," unquote, in TED Talk 2015. The question isn't, do you have the ability, but should you? Do we ever think, should we be doing this? I mean, the whole reason Jurassic Park was created was a warning that it's folly and foolishness. But anyway, in 2020, they were awarded the Nobel Prize for Chemistry. Since then, CRISPR has exploded in use for everything from curing disease to modifying embryos to creating crazy creatures in Dulce Air Force Base underneath the ground. At least that's what they say, and I don't doubt it for a second. In 2018, Chinese scientists like He Jiankui announced he had created the first gene-edited babies, twin girls, edited at the embryonic stage to be resistant to HIV. The global scientific community pretended to panic, but the door was now wide open. In an article called "The CRISPR Baby Scandal Gets Worse" in 2019, MIT Technology Review said, "This is only the beginning. Designer babies, enhanced cognition, and disease resistance are on the horizon." And they weren't kidding, but they probably already knew it was coming. In 2021, researchers at the Salk Institute in California created the first successful human-monkey embryo chimera. Published in Cell, a leading scientific journal, the embryos were kept alive for 19 days. Dr. Juan Carlos Ipzua Belmonte, what a name, my gosh, of the Salk Institute states, "This research helps us understand early human development. It's about science, not monsters." Of course it is. Of course, it's just science. But let's not kid ourselves. It is hybridization. The same thing the Watchers taught before the flood. It's just with better branding this time, right? And using humans for permission, so they don't have to get their hands necessarily dirty themselves. They get you to do the dirty work. So the U.S. has already lifted federal bans on funding chimeric research. China is even further ahead, working on human pig hybrids for organ harvesting and brain implants in primates. Wonderful. And yes, they're already putting human neurons into animal brains. In 2023, Japanese scientists created mice with functional human glial cells tied to memory, learning, and emotion. So what happens when consciousness starts crossing species lines? What happens when a body is mostly animal, but the brain thinks like a man? Does it sound like fiction? Well, the Book of Giants, a DSS fragment from Qumran, describes just that. It says, quote, "They began to sin against beasts and birds, and they brought forth creatures of great confusion," unquote. And here we are again, doing the same stupid thing, defying God's creation, because we don't care about him anymore. We'll do whatever we want. And he's had to interrupt it many times, and I think this is the last time he'll interrupt it, and he will get our attention. So, another major development, synthetic human embryos made without sperm or egg. In 2023, scientists from the Weizmann Institute in Israel created fully formed synthetic human embryos from stem cells. No fertilization, no womb. Nature magazine in June of 2023 said, "These embryo models could help us study human development. They are not real embryos." Maybe not, but the implications are very real. No parents, no lineage, no human spirit, manufactured life, engineered for purpose, but not born with one? So the question isn't just what these beings are, but who claims ownership of them? Patents? Corporations? Governments? Because if life can't be patented, it can be owned, and if it can be owned, it can be weaponized. Very dangerous territory. Now tie in the tech angle. What if you could transfer consciousness into a modified body? Elon Musk's Neuralink is only one of several projects aiming to digitize memory, allowing remote brain control and eventually merge humans with machines. How dandy. Ray Kurzweil, Google Director of Engineering, says, this will allow us to preserve consciousness beyond biology. Yes, it might also be why a passage out of Revelation was written that said that they will seek death and be unable to find it. So you go ahead with that. I'll pass. Hard pass on that. Have fun with it. So this isn't science fiction. It's transhumanism funded by Google DeepMind, OpenAI, DARPA, and BlackRock Neurotech. Their goal? Defeat death. It seems noble, doesn't it? But biblically speaking, the result isn't eternal life. It's soulless persistence, a counterfeit resurrection, and it will not be enjoyable. We already know this in advance from a prophecy that I just mentioned in Revelation. So Genesis 6:9 says that Noah was perfect in his generations. The Hebrew word there is tamim, often used for unblemished sacrificed animals. And that wasn't just about behavior. I think it meant both. It was about genetic purity. Everyone else, corrupted, mixed, altered. And one of the evidences of that is that their thoughts and deeds were evil continually. That is not normal. And what are we doing today? We're repeating the same pattern. This time not with giants in plain sight, although that might come before the end, but with patents, labs, and government grants, as it was in the day of Noah, right? So here's another cool quote I found. It says, they used to build hybrids with blood and stone. Now they build them with code and stem cells. Same rebellion, same blueprint, but this time we can read the patents. Pretty cool. So section 7, and then we have one more, and I'll play you out the rest of The Lantern of Gray that was written by some fans and sent to me via email in an MP3. And I just wanted to thank them again. Jason and Sharon, great job. And if anybody else has an MP3 they want to send in for the show to be used, I'll check it out. And if it's good, we will definitely use it. I think these guys did a great job and deserve a thank you. Okay, so when the gods fell, they didn't disappear. They just hired a new PR firm. That's another great quote. You've seen it. Maybe you've even felt it. The cultural fascination with aliens, UFO disclosure, and interdimensional beings is everywhere from mainstream documentaries to Pentagon memos. But underneath the sci-fi glow, a very old theology is being repackaged. It's not disclosure. This is a spiritual deception operation, and it's playing directly into the Watcher's endgame to reclaim worship, deceive the nations, and prepare the world to receive their counterfeit kingdom. So let's pull the curtain back on these guys, right? I mean, the whole point of this 3-part episode is to pull the curtain back and expose so we know what's going on. So from the beginning, the rebellious sons of God have sought worship, control, and influence. The book of Enoch says they taught forbidden knowledge, established idol worship, and positioned themselves as gods among men. Today, same thing, with a different mask. In the ancient world, Baal, Zeus, Anu, Quetzalcoatl. Today, ascended masters, galactic federation, alien councils, your politicians, men of power, prestige, so on. Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. 2 Corinthians 11:4. So before you can sell the idea that aliens are saviors, you have to erase the biblical framework. First, the globe model replaces the firmament of Genesis 1. Then, outer space replaces the heavenly realm. And then, aliens replace spiritual beings. And then, the creator becomes just another extraterrestrial option. This is why the helio versus geocentric debate is more important than you think. I won't go into it, and I know I have friends that disagree, and that's fine. I still love y'all. But it does lay the groundwork for a very grand deception, and it makes people feel insignificant, like we're just a swarm of gnats in the universe no more important than all the other potentially infinite universes out there. So the universe is too big for us to be alone, right? That quote comes from virtually every science documentary since 1987. In other words, Gnostic cosmology for the Netflix age. That's what it is. In the 19th and 20th centuries, occult channelers like Helena Blavatsky, Alice Bailey, and Madame Helena Rourke began publishing messages from so-called ascended masters, beings claiming to be from Sirius, Orion, or the Pleiades. Alice Bailey, in The Externalization of the Hierarchy, 1934, said that they told us humanity was seeded by higher intelligences and that they are returning to help us evolve. Of course they are. Of course they are. Aren't they great? So we fast forward to today. The Galactic Federation of Light, channeled by dozens of New Age mediums, says Earth is being prepared for contact with higher beings. These beings promise healing technologies, DNA upgrades, and planetary unity. I'm sure they do. And I'm sure they will actually perform that. Anything to take your eyes off of Jesus and his Father and the Holy Spirit. There will be people who will literally worship these beings when they bring this to us. And it sounds familiar, doesn't it? It's really just Genesis 3 all over again. You will not die. You will be like gods. They're just doing it in a different way. So now, even governments are now legitimizing the story, right? U.S. Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office was launched in 2022 to formally investigate UFOs. David Grush, a former intelligence officer, testified under oath before Congress in 2023 that the U.S. government has retrieved non-human biologics and is involved in a decades-long crash retrieval program from the House Oversight Committee, July 26, 2023. Meanwhile, movies, games, and books train the world to see aliens as ancient visitors, benevolent creators, victims of military secrecy, and eventually gods in waiting. Not interdimensional rebellious sons of God. But that's what they are. Dr. Jacques Vallée, in Messengers of Deception, 1979, wrote, "The phenomenon is not just technological. It is spiritual." And he's right. Vallée, a French astrophysicist who helped develop ARPANET, the predecessor to the Internet, came to believe that UFOs are interdimensional, not extraterrestrial, and he wasn't alone. John Keel, in the Mothman Prophecies in 75, said that UFO behavior is more aligned with demonic manifestations than with physical craft. Dr. J. Allen Hynek, former U.S. Air Force consultant and Project Blue Book, says that I now believe that many UFOs are manifestations of spiritual entities attempting to deceive and manipulate. There you have it. The alien savior narrative is pushed through movies like The Arrival, The Eternals, Prometheus, Avatar, Nope, TV shows like Ancient Aliens, Stargate, X-Files, Project Blue Book, books like The Chariots of the Gods by Eric von Däniken, tech circles like Simulation Theory and AI worship like The Singularity. All of these things train the public for one big idea, and that is if something supernatural happens, it must be aliens. And they mostly have our best interest at heart, and they probably seeded us here. Which sets the stage for one of the most sinister plans yet. And it's where it gets strategic. New Age teachers, channeled entities, and even mainstream authors like Barbara Marciniak, author of Bringers of the Dawn, have been telling their followers for decades that a day is coming when, quote, millions will vanish from Earth as part of a planetary cleansing. They will be taken to safety by higher beings, unquote. Does that sound familiar? What if the rapture of 1 Thessalonians 4:17 is real, but the Watchers media empire has already planted an alien explanation in the collective mind? It's not wild speculation. It's been stated repeatedly in New Age and occult circles. A channeled message from Ashtar, recorded in multiple contactee reports, says, quote, "Those who cannot accept the new vibration must be removed for the earth to ascend," unquote. Yeah. And in Hidden Mysteries magazine, issue 8 in 1994, quote, "The evacuation will be done to protect those unready for the planetary shift," unquote. So here's the core deception at the heart of every Watcher era lie. First, you were created by higher beings. Then you can evolve into them. Then truth is what you feel. And then God is a vibration. Jesus was an ascended being, just like you and us. It's the new Gnosticism, and its fingerprints are everywhere. You have deconstruction in Christian circles, mystic universalism in Hollywood, AI prophets and techno-priests in Silicon Valley. It's not just spiritual confusion, it's the greatest psyop of all time. Because the old gods still speak, but now they come in peace, with light shows, pyramids, and a cover story. So let's wrap this up with our last section 8, so I can get to bed, because I got to get up early, just like you probably do. So, Genesis 11:4, "And they said, 'Come, let us build for ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves.'" There it is, the first global rebellion where humanity, under the guidance of someone far older and darker than Nimrod, tries to open the gates again. Fast forward to today. The city is digital, the tower is cloud-based, and the name they're making isn't yours, it's theirs. It's the final act of the Watcher's playbook. Everything we've talked about, the rituals, hybrids, tech, media psyops, and alien deceptions have one singular purpose: rebuild a Babel-like structure, remove the restrainer, welcome the counterfeit kingdom. So let's break that down. The blueprint is complete. We now have a unified language, a unified tower, the language of code and data, a tower of internet, satellite, and AI infrastructure, and a unified people deceived not by force, but by convenience. In the World Economic Forum in 2022, digital identity will soon be as important as your real identity, if it's not already. Through CBDC, smart cities, climate restrictions, and UNWEF global frameworks, we are re-centralizing everything God decentralized at Babel. Remember what he did next? Genesis 11:8, "So the Lord scattered them, and they stopped building the city." God scattered. The enemy wants to regather and has been doing it for centuries. So, what are they waiting for their final move? I think it's for the restrainer to be removed, and the floodgates will just reopen. 2 Thessalonians 2, 6 and 7 speaks of restraining force holding back the man of lawlessness. It says, "And you know what restrains him now, for the mystery of lawlessness is already at work." The church, the true body of Christ, indwelt by the Holy Spirit, has acted as a barrier or buffer between full-blown darkness and the rest of the world. But what happens when the restrainer is taken out of the way? And by the way, we live in a very privileged age, folks. There is no other age in history where the creator of this universe takes up residence inside your body like a temple. This is it. You were born into a privileged age in which God knew that you would be able to handle what's coming to you and what you're going to have to deal with. So when we're taken out, the veil lifts, they arrive, the bloodlines step forward, the beast system activates. And then the lie, the big one, gets revealed. God didn't take them, we did. They weren't ready, you are. And they get all the upgrades. And practical godhood, the healing machines, cure for cancers, miracles. Everything that makes them believe that the guy who really isn't the Messiah is the Messiah. And they'll worship him. The whole world will chase after him. Don't think you won't, you will. It will be the perfect inversion. Good is called evil, light is darkness, and the lie becomes a blessing. Here's the pitch from the enemy's last TED Talk. God made you flawed, but we have a CRISPR AI and neural cloud subscription. No need for resurrection when we can upload and download you. And no need for a soul when you've got source code. So in their kingdom, you are the product, not a child of God. You're a user, a node, and a programmable asset, and the people will love it. 2 Thessalonians 2:11 says they will believe the lie. And in Revelation 11:15, there's this really inconvenient prophecy. The kingdom of this world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. So you can build the tower, you can launch your satellites, your biohybrids, and your ritual-soaked AI priests, but the real king is coming back. Not as a baby this time, and not as a bloodied man on a cross, but as a conquering lion on a white horse with fire in his eyes, and a sword that doesn't need a software update. And when that happens, as Private Hudson said in Aliens 1986, game over, man. Game over. We're screwed. So what now? Here's where we land the ship. Don't be deceived by shiny tech with ancient roots. Don't trade your soul for a microchip and a monthly stipend. Don't forget that you bear the image of God, not the brand of Babel. You were made in his image, and you were meant to be an ambassador here and represent him. So resist with wisdom, discern with scripture, and remember that God scattered Babel, not with an army, but with confusion. The enemy's own plans will turn on themselves. So, the tower is nearly complete, the lie is rehearsed, the ritual is global, but so is the remnant, and we are not buying the upgrade. And with that, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. We're hoping to have some guest interviews soon. Mondays at 8, Wednesdays at 8 p.m., Fridays at 9 p.m. Central. We have our top 3 of the week. Wednesday is listener emails, and thank God for our listeners who created this song I'm about to play you out with. I hope you guys have a great work week, and we will see you Wednesday night.
Coming from the wild, from the rain and the stone, where the wind has no name and the traveler's alone. There's warmth in the fire and truth in the tale of the watcher who walks where the bold-hearted fail.
He carries no sword, yet the darkness gives way to the lantern he lifts at the end of the day. He stands on the watchtower, still and unswayed, where the lost find a path through the fog and the fray. Pilgrim gray, oh steward of the lands, you carry the light in your weather-worn hands. A tale at the hearth, a guide through the night. You open the gate between the wrong and the right. Not in thunder, but whispers and song, where seed lines have warred in the silence too long. From Babel to Kaffir, from shadow to flame, the chronicles grow with each hidden name.
He bears not a crown, but the weight of the truth, a lantern for elders, a shield for the youth. He tends to the gates where the watchers once fell, and warns of their lies with a clear ringing bell.
Your pilgrim gray, our watchman in flame, your chronicles echo through ages and name. We drink to your post, your unshaken vow, to the tower you guard, we remember it now. So gather your hearts, ye weary of tread, for the veil has grown thin where the ancients once bled, but a voice still remains at the crossroad and gate, the pilgrim who watches though others grow late.
So hail to the gray with a lantern held high, with scrolls in his satchel and stars in his eye. The seed war still rages, the fire yet burns, but the inn still stands when the wanderer returns.